Jim?
I'd like to call a meeting to order for the County Commissioners of April 25th. The first item on our agenda is the election of officers. We will elect a chair and a vice chair, and the floor is now open for nominations for chair. There are nominations.
Nominate Rita.
So there's are there any other nominations from the floor? I'm hearing none. I think by acclamation, we can say Rita is the new chair, and I will turn the meeting over to her.
Any nominations for vice? I'd like to take nominations for vice chair.
So I'll nominate Matt.
I'll decline. I have enough to do it.
Any other nominations? Yeah. Oh,
Oh, neither one of us can do it,
Okay.
I'm giving it to
if
you.
that's
Jim.
okay.
so
So I'll nominate
I'll
Jim to be
I'll
vice chair.
second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So I'd like to call the April 25th County Commissioners meeting to order. And, well, we've already done that, election of officers. So first up, announcements. Yeah, let's try your agenda there. County Commission is being video and audio recorded.
No other announcements.
Any public comment? Hearing none. Move on to new business. There is none. So moving on to the approval of minutes and warrants.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
An approval of payroll and treasury warrants for April 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any commissioners' reports or comments? None? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jim, for your service as county. And Rita, welcome. Okay, we call to order the April 25th Select Board meeting. We have a couple changes to the agenda tonight. On the Citizen and Department request number 3, we're going to table that to another time. And then the discussion on marijuana in the Selectmen's reports, for the public input, we're going to move that to the town manager's report after the coastal resiliency. So if you're here to listen about the marijuana subject matter, you won't be here as long. Okay, announcements, Libby?
Thank you. This meeting is also being video and audio recorded. We have 2018 committee, board, and commission vacancies up online. There are a number of them. We are in the process of seeking whether or not incumbents want to be reappointed. We encourage the public to take a look at what's open and apply. And there's some deadlines for application. The board will have a couple of public hearings and then make appointments on June 27th. I believe is the date. DPW has an announcement. This Friday, is Arbor Day, right? April 27th is Arbor Day. Do you want to do the announcement? It's Friday.
Thank you. So this Saturday and Sunday, DPW arborist Dale Gary and supporting staff will be back at the MRF, the Material Recovery Facility, handing out seedlings in support of Arbor Day annual event. 8 to noon, there'll be ample supplies, so either day. They're sort of controlled. It's set together as 2 handout days, so we don't run out day 1. So if you don't get any first day, you can come back Sunday. We'll be set up right near the Boy Scouts can collection shed. A couple other announcements? Perfect.
Okay, I'll read the proclamation unless somebody else on the board is I think it's me. So, Arbor Day proclamation, whereas the National Arbor Day Foundation has declared April 27, 2018 as Arbor Day, and whereas the citizens of Nantucket recognize the important historic, environmental, and aesthetic qualities which trees provide. And whereas the Select Board support the protection, preservation, and propagation of all town-owned trees. And whereas the town of Nantucket desires to enhance awareness of Arbor Day on the island community. Now, therefore, in recognition of the important role trees play in preserving our unique island heritage, we, the Select Board of the town of Nantucket in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim April 27th, 2018 as Arbor Day on Nantucket. Signed this 25th day of April 2018. It has been proclaimed.
Great. Thank you very much. Rob, did you want to do the South Beach Street announcement or?
So a few short, quick announcements. South Beach Street opened last night, about 9 o'clock, with not too much fanfare. Glad to have it back online and was being well utilized as early as this morning. Thank you for everyone for getting the word out. We have an upcoming this official ceremonial ribbon cutting at the Whaling Museum tomorrow. So we're going to have an opportunity to thank all the folks that helped us get to the point where we were able to open up. And interesting, going back to the beginning of this, we were asked today exactly how long it was closed. It was 111 days. So that's it. The South Beach Street extension has a binder course on it, and that's going to be final paved. Right now it's scheduled for Friday, just for a heads up. That and a short stretch of Oak Street. There's an upcoming public presentation and works session scheduled at the NHS cafeteria Thursday, May 17th, to begin discussions and getting input from the public for the 3 intersection projects, 4 Corners, Surfside Bartlett, and Old South at Fairgrounds. And I'll leave that with Erica. And finally, we've had some pretty serious situations going on recently with illegal dumping of household hazardous waste in the form of paint and/or paint thinner in Sconset. And it's led to the disruption of the Sconset wastewater treatment plant. I'm sure David might have a couple points to make there. But I wanted to hand out and make available for folks the flyers for the household hazardous waste collection days. The dates, we've had our first in April 7th. The rest of the dates for the year are June 16th, July 28th, September 22nd, October 20th, and December 15th. And this is open both to households as well as commercial people.
Where did they drop? What are they just pouring it on the ground? Is that?
No, we believe it's being introduced to the sewer system through houses, through drain systems,
Right.
Sinks, toilets, that sort of thing.
And Matt, I just want to, and the board, that I have received several concerns from a variety of different people about hazardous waste being stored in basements, but as well of it being disposed into drains on the side of the road. And so I think we're going to work on putting together some best practice management guidelines for household and commercial because people are seeing it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also follow up a little bit on that. It is illegal to do this dumping. There is nothing legal about it. And it has affected, if David might want to give a few words about this, Wisconsin wastewater treatment facility in a very negative way. It's totally irresponsible to do this.
Thank you. And I gave Rita some handouts that I got from DEP in a few different languages. I have some more copies here. If we can get them maybe up on the town website. DEP is pretty aggressive. They want to know what happened, where it happened, and stuff like that. So we're going to be working with them. Rob and I have been working with Ray up at DEP. Even minor amounts of latex paint, 1 or 2 gallons at 5 or 6 houses, will have an effect with the amount of VOCs. Even though latex is deemed, you can wash it in the sink or whatever, wash your paintbrush. Large quantities has a drastic effect on our biology at our treatment plants. This last effect was on April 13th. It was a couple days after Rita had been contacted and was talking to some people that the Sconset plant was nearly wiped out with all its biology, which created some problems for us to take and still be able to maintain discharge permit. So what we actually had to do was get a couple of the septic haulers as well as our trucks and haul raw sewage, raw influent coming in from Surfside all the way to Sconset to reseed the plant, to get the plant back up and alive and running. We did that again multiple times during the week, and we hauled a bunch of stuff out there again today, including brew waste from the brewery, to try to reestablish our biological inventory that we need, especially with a big weekend coming up. We have to have that inventory to be able to handle the waste coming in. So even though you can wash your paintbrushes or whatever in the sink, little tiny bits isn't such an issue, but what we believe was dumped in the Sconset was possibly quite an amount of turpentine or paint thinner, 5, 10 gallons, 20 gallons. We've been tracking around on quite a few of the different roads out there. We're actually taking tanker loads of stuff from Surfside and we're dumping it in streets in Sconset throughout the whole village to try to flush the lines out now to see where it's basically coming from. We've pinpointed it to a couple of areas. Now it's to try to get in and see if, do some smoking in Sconset to see if it's in storm drains or if it's coming from homes. There's so much work going out there right now. To go door to door would take us a few weeks, but it's been quite a challenge to keep that plant alive the last week and a half. So, but we're getting there. But we still have some residuals coming down some of the streets where you open the manhole covers up and you still have that white flow coming by of white paint. So it's a challenge.
Yes.
Is there any thought of handing these things out at job sites? Handing
Well,
out the information? Because if we don't go to and hand it out, why will it change?
Well, that's why I think, and that's why when DEP offered us all these handouts in multiple languages, I think if we can generate a lot of these, and if I can free somebody up to go to door, and or at the hazardous waste days, or maybe marine lumber, or even island lumber, they could be on the counter there. So we have to approach those.
That's a great idea if they hand it to every single person.
But even talking to some of the painters that I know, they're like, Dave, this has been happening for years. Well, they just don't know what the effect of it is. And this time we really got hit with a load that has done some damage. Now we have to completely flush the plant, wash all the tanks, empty the tanks, shovel anything out that we find. So it's a process, but we're getting through it.
Could you speak to the penalty if this person, in terms of a citation?
That's something that we still have to work on to find out. It's against federal law and state law to do any of these kind of dumpings. To prove it's going to be kind of.
I would assume, I'm just saying it might be a deterrent if people understand the consequences.
Well,
if
I
they're
believe
found
that
out.
it could entail jail time too, briefly talking to the DEP people. I don't have the exact figures or the numbers, but something we can come up with, and we can actually put that on the flyer as well. But, if you see someone on the side of the road parked near a storm drain or something like that, it may look unusual, may not. But oftentimes we found, I know Rob's found early in the morning, I found in the morning, you go by a manhole cover or a catch basin, it's all white or gray or whatever. People are dumping overnight. And it has drastic effects in the harbor. If it gets to the harbor, you're really talking issues. But luckily, this was contained so far to just the wastewater system. So.
I think as well, David, you brought up a good point and a good reminder that it also has drastic negative impact on septic systems. So whether it's the town, the harbor, or your own septic system.
Yeah, septic systems especially, because now you got a small contained system. And once that gets into your septic system, it wipes out the biology that's actually doing the job for you, that's in the tanks. So it's as bad as fats, oils, and greases. It's as bad as, the wipes. It's just, this was quite whether it was a coincidence with timing when Rita was contacted or whatever, but we felt the effects drastically. So,
And some of this, I look at some of this, they've said it's happened for years, and it kind of has happened. But it was at a different level. The island was at a different level. We didn't have as many painters. We didn't have as many houses. Some things that were they weren't allowed, but they weren't so bad. At this level now, they're terrible.
Absolutely.
And I think that's this is some of the costs of what we're the growth that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I went by a
I just,
job
it's sad.
the other day up on Center Street, and there was like 7 ladders and 14 people painting one building. Like I said, we've grown.
Yeah.
So
I think we've demonstrated the impact of creating awareness, though, when you were very vocal about the need to reduce, waste and water usage and whatever. So, in terms of the problems with our septic system, our sewer system. So, I think if you go out and maybe if you all think it's serious, take that kind of approach and get out and communicate the consequences of it, whether it's to the wastewater treatment plant or to the harbor or to people's septic systems.
that's right. And as small as that was, with the little brief sayings on both
Yeah.
vessels and stuff, it really worked. I mean, there was
Yeah.
quite a decrease in
Right.
water usage,
Yeah.
which was
I
very
still watch
significant.
them. I still see.
No, it was significant. That really helped out. So, but thank you.
Thanks, Steve. That's it. Okay. Is there, moving on to public comment, is there anybody here who wants to speak about something not on the agenda tonight? Any public comment? Seeing none, move on to new business. No, nothing I know of. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Do I have a motion to approve payroll warrants for weeks of?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approval of treasury warrants?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, was there a second?
I'll second that.
Sorry. Up.
Jim's moving fast, trying to keep up with you, Jim. Approval of pending contracts. Is there any questions or comments?
No. I make a motion to approve pending contracts.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, over to town manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, the first item is an update on our progress regarding coastal resiliency planning. We have, just quick overview, we engaged a consulting firm, Malone and McBroom. We have Dave Murphy, who's our person that we've been working with on this, to help us develop a plan. We've been working on public outreach approaches, and we had this update scheduled with you all a while back. We have a couple of public forums coming up, one on May 10th at 5 o'clock here in this room, another on July 18th. It's a Wednesday here in this room at 6 o'clock. We are developing a mailing list and list of groups to outreach to. We met with the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy last week to see what help they could provide and answer any questions that they had. They had some very good input regarding a survey instrument that we're also working on and help with public outreach. And there may be other groups to reach out to. I think we definitely want to meet with Remain about this and get going on working on the plan. We did have a good discussion with the Coastal Conservancy group about what it's going to take to prepare the actual plan and the need to really get a good amount of community input and solid input. And that is some advice that we've also heard several times now over the past few months from Coastal Zone Management. They are very much encouraging us to get as much public input as we can, because this is a community plan. And we need to understand, as we develop the plan, where does the community want to focus our efforts? How do we want to prioritize them? What sorts of efforts do we want to initiate? There are retreat efforts, accommodation, protection. Dave is going to explain what those mean. How does this plan interact with other plans? So it may be that while we wanted to have something of a draft plan by the end of the summer-ish, depending on the public outreach we actually end up doing, it may be a bit longer than that. The newspaper has talked a bit about a kind of a conference about this sometime in the fall, so maybe we want to wait for that input. I'm not totally sure. Coastal Conservancy, I think, is looking at some different films and things to raise awareness about this, so their help has been great. And any other groups that are out there that are hearing or watching this, we would love to get your input as well, but our intent is to contact the ones that, local ones that we know of, and go from there. So Dave's got an overview here, and I think we'd welcome any questions or input from the board.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to give a brief update on the progress tonight. And hopefully there'll be time for questions after a few slides. I'm David Murphy from the firm Malone and McBroom. The last time I was in front of this board was probably about 11 years ago. We adopted the first hazard mitigation plan. And I haven't been back to in front of the board since then, but I was in this room a few months ago for the hazard mitigation plan update, which is going on right now. And we'll talk about that briefly as well. Okay, so a quick agenda for the next 10 slides. Why are we developing this coast resilience plan? What the scope of services includes, some potential outcomes, what the next steps might be, and then we'll end with a little reminder about the public meetings coming up and what we hope to accomplish in those meetings. Okay, so just a quick definition of resilience. This word is thrown around these days more than any other, I feel like, but it's good to define things so we know what we're talking about. Typically, resilience means you can resist some adverse thing that's happening, like a disaster, absorb the effects rather than kind of having yourself knocked out, recover from them quickly, and then adapt going forward. So traditionally, this is hazard mitigation, plus reducing your time for recovery, plus looking at long-term changing conditions, plus kind of like looking at the normal conditions and what the new normal would be. In the context of coastal resilience, we're looking specifically at sea level rise, shoreline change, erosion, growth of spits, that sort of thing, and then the increasing magnitude and frequency of storm events. And surely you've seen the water levels that were recorded this winter in Nantucket Harbor were some of the highest on record. A couple graphics we have up there. The top right graphic is for those of you who like time, and it shows how resilience is kind of the decreasing of recovery time. So what used to take a few months to recover a small business, maybe a few days, that's becoming resilience. If you're kind of a math person, the lower right graph is for you, and it kind of shows the resilience shock. So you're carrying along in a horizontal line, there's an event like a storm, and the line dips down that shows the loss that's occurring. So if you look at the slide as I advance the graphics, to become more resilient means you're reducing that loss, you're minimizing that loss, and you're reducing your time to recovery. One quick note, I meant to say this early on, this slideshow, there's a copy in your packet. I did make some changes, some formatting type changes. We have a new logo, I threw that on there, but there's not any huge changes. So what you have in your packet is pretty much the same as what you're seeing. So why do a coastal resilience plan? It's a comprehensive plan to make the town more resilient to these things that we're talking about, sea level rise, shoreline change, more increased flooding, that sort of thing. So it's system-wide in the entire town, not just specific areas. It's going to help, we hope, break down silos. Typically, that's what you want to do with coastal resilience planning. Whereas hazard mitigation planning, which we'll talk about in about 30 seconds, you don't always break down those silos. So coastal resilience planning, we have people in planning, public works, and emergency management who need to work together closely, whereas in hazard mitigation plan, they can kind of work a little bit separately and still carry on. Also in coastal resilience plans, you can consolidate diverse documents and efforts, kind of make them dovetail. You can specifically address coastal impacts of climate change, such as shoreline change, erosion, flooding, as sea level rises. And here's the big one, which is italicized, is you want to strengthen your position for funding, because going forward, everyone's going to be competing all across the whole country for the same funds. So we want to really make sure that the town is positioned for that. The hazard mitigation plan, which is going on right now, the update, is a very prescribed process. FEMA gives you a checklist, they give you a guidebook, they say you better do it our way or it's not going to get approved. We know this, so we're here to help you get through that. The hazard mitigation plan only looks 5 years ahead because it only has a lifespan of 5 years. So the assumption is five years from now, there would be an update. And it covers all natural hazards. So if you'd like to address winter storms, earthquakes, wildfires, tornadoes, that gets done in the hazard mitigation plan, but not necessarily in the coastal resilience plan. So that's the difference. Here's here's the flow chart of what we're going through for the coastal resilience plan. In general, reviewing existing capabilities. So what can the town do now? We're collecting some data. Oh, wow. Whatever that change was, that was great. Thank you. Completing a risk assessment, looking at options of adaptation or resilience. There'll be some public meetings, charrettes. There's a survey that we've been batting around that we might unveil. There's a draft of it out right now. So if you've taken a survey, you may have taken the draft. Put together a kind of a coastal resilience framework, document it in a planning document, and then there'll be an implementation plan and process in that document as well. So one plan will come out of this. The goal is to have it be readable. So maybe take everything that's really techie and put it in an appendix, but the readable part will be less than 50 pages with graphics. I'm not going to take you through the risk assessment, which we've been working on and what the results are, but I'm going to just tell you about kind of how it's done. So risk, again, for people who like math, I like math, I guess, vulnerability times frequency. That's the equation. So you need to look at the frequency of something happening, like a coastal storm, and then what's vulnerable, what structures, what people, what infrastructure, the sewer pumping station, what's vulnerable. If something has a low frequency and something doesn't have much vulnerability, the risk is low. That's this blue box right here. On the other hand, if vulnerability is very high, frequency is high, the risk is very high. So our job is to look at major storms, chronic storms, daily high tide, and specific sites, neighborhoods, the entire island, and then try to patch in these things that could happen, what's vulnerable. Bluff erosion, beach degradation, erosion of the wastewater plant, discharge lagoons, the bridge that we've been talking about for a few months, just inundation in the downtown area, and put that all together and figure out what the risks are, the low risks and the high risks, and that informs our planning process. So that's underway. Not going to say too much more about that. Then we move into the phase where we look at the options. So 1990 was when the feds first said, look, there's three ways to deal with these risks. There's retreating, stepping back from the shoreline. There's accommodation, which means living with the water. And then there's protection, which means kind of walling off the water, walling off the erosion. And we do still, and to a large degree, use these three options to guide us in the choices that we make in shoreline communities. These are actual pictures. Here's an elevation of a home in Brant Point. So that's accommodation. That home can now accommodate water when it floods. However, there are more options than those three these days. We talk about transportation options, where we look at our transportation infrastructure, our roads and bridges. We look at shoreline management options, including living shorelines, which are very popular right now, sediment management, that sort of thing. Different kinds of shore protection structures. We look at building elevations and floodproofing, where to direct development through either rolling easements or zoning, that sort of thing. Other kinds of regulations, development limits, building standards, building codes. Where can we go higher, go better? And then lastly, but never least, emergency management, making sure that we have places to put people if they need to evacuate, et cetera. Possible outcomes of the plan. I think this is my second to last slide. We're almost there. This could be a roadmap for townwide decision making. It could set up some minimum design criteria considerations for future projects. So what's a design criteria consideration? We're not going to say in the plan every wall must be elevation 15. We're going to say every wall should look at X, Y, and Z, and then the designer could decide what the elevation would be. We could prioritize geographic areas to address short-term versus long-term. We want to have some ideas for maybe maintaining townwide tax base and levels of service if properties and infrastructure are lost to erosion. And if we can figure this out, I'm going to take it back to Wellfleet, where I've been trying to abandon a parcel for 5 years with the cottage that used to be on it. I just can't find a way to delete it off the tax base. So I'm going to take that one home with me. If there's some consensus to do so, identify areas where protection, accommodation, and managed retreat could be the long-term goal. Identify next steps, and then sources of funding. I did throw a slide in here, which is not in your packet, possible funding sources for the next steps. We could look at the Massachusetts MVP Resilience Program grants, which there are planning grants and project grants, we've heard. And then the Mass CZM grants, which have been around for several years, and many of your neighbors on the Cape and Martha's Vineyard have been getting some CZM grants for design of projects. There's always our federal funding sources, when there's money in them. And then I think one thing about these plans that's really nice is you can set yourself up for when there are special appropriations, like after Hurricane Sandy, Massachusetts didn't get a lot, but New York and New Jersey did. And for towns that had already done some planning, they could capture sort of more of that funding. So getting set up for the next disaster, I hate to say that we're going to be ambulance chasers, but it's kind of what we are when it comes to funding. So there are 2 charrettes that are scheduled. As the town manager said, there may be other opportunities, but these 2 are at least on the calendar, May 10th and July 18th. They last 2 hours. The gist of it is we'd arrive, greet people, have some refreshments. There'd be a presentation where we present out information. There'd be a charrette part of it where we go around the room and look at boards, and then kind of a reporting out of the meeting at the end. If you look at the top, we've got some possible comment cards that we put together. So like you would take a card, a glossy card that says accommodation on the front, and then and you probably recognize this building, which is officially accommodating what's going on, but we don't know for how long. And then you could turn the card over and you could write down your thoughts. And then there'll be boards that are up for the charrette part of the meeting, and you could, I hope I didn't blind anybody, and you can, put Post-it notes or colored dots on the boards. So these usually work pretty well. I always have a lot of fun at these kinds of meetings. It's better than just me standing and talking. And I have time for questions if the board would like.
Well, first comment, we do know how long because that building's gone.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two, which is pretty appropriate, what we're talking
I'm
about.
feeling unprepared
No,
suddenly.
I didn't do it for that reason. It's pretty appropriate that we're talking about it though, because that did happen to that building. It's iconic building that we all
Right.
have known.
So a combination works until it doesn't.
Exactly. And the other question, are we going to have numbers attached? Like if we're going to discuss the various options, is there, like, we like numbers, I like numbers.
Yeah.
Are there numbers attached to
Cost,
for how much
yes.
to retreat versus
Yeah.
accommodating versus
Planning level.
Yeah.
So round to the nearest 1,000 or whatever. But yes.
for the charrette? That would be really helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit about, I see you're engaging the community, which is great. Just talk a little bit about your experience either in other communities or how you might project how we can be successful in creating, not only creating awareness, but bringing people to think about taking some action, becoming engaged in that. Just talk a little bit about that for a minute.
Well, I think the sign here that's really positive is that people are already coming to all of you to become engaged. Usually when we work in a community, we're out there beating the pavement and trying to find people, drag them out of their houses for meetings. So you've solved that one. You already have organizations coming to you. I remember when we worked in the first hazard mitigation plan in 2006, 2007, we sent individual letters at the time, probably wasn't even emails, to different organizations in town and had a meeting with all of them. So that always works well, making sure that we invite everybody specifically rather than just putting it in the newspaper. I mean, it's all the things that you're already doing. I think that you're taking all the right steps. We're going to have this survey. We're going to have the meetings and the charrettes so people could, if people are shy, they can take the survey on SurveyMonkey. There are people who are shy. Hard to believe, but they like to just sit and take a survey. So there's something for them as well. But we can even print copies and put them in the libraries. So lots of different ways to reach people. But it sounds like you already have many interested folks coming out, which is great.
Any other comments? More?
I think just maybe not to print, but I think it's important that we all realize that the funding for this is just a very initial investment, and that it in no way reflects the board's commitment to supporting these efforts. And I think if we can think about that as, investment over a long period, because I know my first reaction was, gosh, that's not a lot of money for such an important policy, conversation. So I think at least that's my understanding. And I think that's important that everybody realizes that.
It's a good point that you raise, and I think I commend the town for putting up the initial seed of money. I mean, typically we work with communities that won't do it until they have a grant in hand. Mm-hmm. So you've already you have a gold star on you, and I think going forward with additional phases, there'll be grant funding for that.
Okay.
And how long does it generally take to get the grant funding? Like how far in advance do we have to apply?
Let me just go back a couple slides. So the MVP grant program, which is for low-level planning, so not huge conceptual designs. When I say low level, I don't mean it's not important, but it's sort of just the basis. Okay. That funding grant period is open now, and applications are due May 11th or 12th, I believe, and it's meant to be annual. So each spring there'd be an opening of that program, and then the duration, they let you have a year basically to do the work. The Mass CZM grant program, which is the second bullet here, is also annual. So sometime later in the spring, that's open, you can apply and then use the funds. That one has a longer time frame. I think you have more than a year to use those funds. But both programs are annual, so if you didn't apply for one of them now, you could next year. I find that the time goes more quickly than we think it's going to.
So you put in an application, a month later. And then
On
you get
the
funding.
MVP, it's a quick turnaround. You find out, yes.
The MVP program is fairly new, and Dave probably knows a lot more about it than I do, but the initial requirement is that you get certified as an MVP community, and that is what we're hoping to apply for now.
Right.
I think Chuck and Dave were working on that. And then there would be subsequent grant opportunities once you're certified for other things. And we're coordinating now to look at possible projects for CZM grants, which a round is opening up very soon, or if maybe it already is open. So there are some things we're definitely looking at, and Mullen and McBroom is very, very helpful to help identify what some of those might be.
Thank you. Good clarification.
I guess my last question for the town managers, has a project manager within the town been assigned to this, and who is that?
Yes, that is Chuck Larson. Chuck is our strategic projects manager, so it's a good fit.
Just want to jump on the kind of the funding bandwagon you guys already talked about. I saw in the slides the strength and position for funding. We haven't really talked too much about that. Don, you had a good question. I think this year, 2017, was the most natural disasters the United States has ever had in 1 year.
Most expensive in 1 year, right?
Or most expensive, right? Yeah. So we're heading that direction. Yeah. So your Sandy example is good to be ready to have these plans done. Right. I know it's kind of like ambulance chasing, but it's smart planning.
Yes,
so I'm glad we're heading that direction.
Agree.
Is there anyone from the public that have a comment or a question on the scope? Yep.
Burton Balkind. I took the survey. I don't know if you're open to any recommendations right now about the survey. I took what do you call it, a test survey and the first few questions they ask very broad questions, and the answers that you can pick from don't really match up with at least my, like asking like, where do you work on the island? Well, I'm a landscaper. I work in Nantucket. I work in Cisco. I work but you only could pick one. So I just wonder if there's a feedback mechanism that we can give you some good feedback on some of the questions.
It's happening now, so thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Appreciate that. Yeah. And maybe if the board is okay with it, I can leave my contact information with folks who have comments, and they can just directly contact me.
That's a great idea.
As far as the survey goes, also, we got some good input from the Coastal Conservancy Group, and I think Chuck was going to work with somebody there to expand the survey or clarify it a bit. One of the feedback suggestions that we had was that people may not totally understand the terminology, retreat, accommodation, protection, how that stuff applies. And I think it's sort of important to use that vocabulary when we're applying for grants and stuff like that, because that's what the language is. But maybe there's a way to easily explain what it means.
There is, and I think we may have assumed, probably very incorrectly, that we would kind of roll it out at the same time as a public meeting, and everybody who came to the public meeting would hear the presentation. But that, of course, won't occur. Not everybody can make the public meetings, so we need to do a better job making sure the survey is understandable. And it is still a draft, so if you feel like you got through it and you want us to hear your answers, we're going to take a look and see the responses, and they're not going to be wiped clean. It's not like we have a delete button or anything, but there'll be an official unveiling of the survey once we get comments as well.
Anything else from the board? Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. We're going to move on to the marijuana discussion.
So the next item, which we moved to town manager's report, but it was really under the board's comments. A couple weeks ago, the board had a presentation from Katie Loftman from Town Council's office about the marijuana regs, the state marijuana regs that are now official. And at your meeting, there was some discussion about how to obtain additional public feedback about where we are in our situation, in the town of Nantucket with the regs. And as you all know, we have a moratorium on retail sales through December 31st, 2018. And if we are going to change that in any way, we will need to do so at a special town meeting, which we are talking about having this fall, probably October, but at your meeting next week, I'll be reviewing with you a potential timeline or timeline options. And we asked Katie to be here tonight if you have any questions about this, but I think the main discussion was going to be how does the board itself want to receive public input or seek it out?
So just to clarify process, January 1st, the moratorium is over. So special town meeting, we have to get our ducks in a row and get public input to decide if we want to ban retail, limit, understanding all the licenses. This is the conversation, correct?
Yeah, and Katie can give some additional information about what is all required, because a ban also requires a ballot vote, and there would be a time frame issue with that. So we are going to need to keep in mind what our time frame is, because you'll have to make a decision by, a certain date, early summerish, probably.
Yeah, Katie, you want to come up? I have a quick comment. I'm interested to hear from the public on, 63 or 65% of Nantucketers voted yes in November 2016 to legalize it, and there was a long sentence. But did they really understand? Was it retail shops and where they're going to be, and the bigger picture of it? And I think that's what, at least I'm looking for in the public, for us to get it out and get some feedback from the public.
Agreed.
So at the special town meeting last fall, there was a moratorium that was put in place as a zoning moratorium. And there was also some zoning that was passed that allowed marijuana establishments in certain districts subject to special permit. But that zoning was made subject to the moratorium. So even though the zoning exists in the zoning bylaw, it would not become effective until January 1st of 2019. So any changes that need to be made to that zoning, so for example, if you wanted to, put in place additional special permit requirements or design criteria, or expand sort of the scope of that zoning, because it was a fairly straightforward basic zoning bylaw, that would have to be done by zoning amendment. As with any zoning amendment, it has to follow the procedures of 48 Section 5, requires a planning board hearing, and then would have to be voted by 2/3 majority at a special town meeting. The other options for amendment to what the town has done so far that have been discussed and that have special requirements attached to them are the putting in place of a limitation on retail sales. If that limitation falls below 20% of your annual package store licenses, then that requires, in addition to being put in place as a bylaw, it would also be subject to a ballot vote by the voters in order to become effective. The same procedure would have to be applied to any type of ban. And as we discussed before, a ban could be on all types of recreational adult use marijuana, or it could be on some subset. The limitation language is specific to retail establishments. That number below 20% is really a limitation on the retail sales. There's no corresponding limitation language that requires a ballot vote if you're looking to limit any other type of marijuana establishment that's not a retail establishment. So those are the considerations and concerns that you would have to look at in terms of timing with respect to the different options you have to pursue at this point.
Katie, we talked before this meeting on the 20% of liquor package store licenses. So that's 8. So it's 1.6 here. And you looked in the minutes for the Cannabis Control Commission, I believe, and it rounds up. So is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That has been a question a number of municipalities have been asking. What happens if we end up with a fractional percentage that's below 20%? And the guidance that they're going to give from the Cannabis Control Commission, this is just sort of a recent meeting of theirs, was that they voted to issue further municipal guidance such that that number becomes rounded to the next closest whole number, rounded up. So if you have 1.6 as your fraction, then that would be 2 licenses. If you're looking to limit to 2 or fewer, that would require a ballot vote.
Okay. So 2-1 or ban is a ballot vote.
That's correct. Yep.
And 3, we could vote on it ourselves, and that would be, if we limit it to 3.
It still has to be a bylaw, right?
Yes. So if you want to impose a limitation that is higher than that 20%, the mechanism for doing that would still be a bylaw, but it would not require the corresponding ballot vote.
Okay, thank you.
I've had quite a few questions about, I think it's more micro businesses, but the craft cultivators. And in terms of how the moratorium impacts that with the May 1st deadline for applications, if someone is considering micro business, that can they only sell to retail establishments or could they sell to medical establishments as well in the future?
So as of right now, a micro business is just an adult use recreational license category. They are still subject to the moratorium that you have in place because they're basically a subset of marijuana cultivator and product manufacturer. And what a micro business really is they've tiered the production for purposes of license categories. So a micro business would be 5,000 square feet or less of canopy or grow space. And they have the ability to also have a co-located product manufacturing operation. Although if they are taking product from another location, they have a cap of 2,000 pounds annually on how much product they can process. But really, that's a type of business structure. It has to be a Massachusetts residence. Same thing with craft marijuana cultivation. So all those uses, although not specifically defined in the zoning, are really subsets of the uses that are subject to the zoning, and would be subject to the zoning that you've put in place.
So just to clarify, I think our conversation has been more around the question of whether or not there's any limitations on a retail establishment. How do those limitations, or the conversation about micro businesses or craft cultivators, that side, are there any limitations to be discussed there? Or is it once we say we're going to have 5 retail, then as many micro businesses can set up or craft cultivators can set up as they want? Or how does that work?
Right. So the limitation part of this, the numeric limitation, is something that you could establish by bylaw on different types of uses if you wanted to. Now, because Nantucket is not a community that can take that product that's grown and necessarily send it, to other, if you don't have the retail market to support it, it's not going to be able to be distributed to other retail vendors in other parts of the Commonwealth. So I think as you're looking at limitations, if you impose a retail limitation, I think there's going to be a natural sort of commercial limitation that ends up following as a result of that type of a limitation, just because you wouldn't be able to support a large grow facility that didn't have an outlet for its product.
Thank you.
What should we be considering in terms of the delivery? I don't think that they're allowing it right now, but what if the state opens that up, that you can be a delivery truck, essentially? And should we be anticipating that ahead of time in a bylaw?
So there's 2 different parts of delivery. So number one, transportation of the product is one class of license. And that has been addressed by the Cannabis Control Commission at this point in time. If you are a license category, such as a cultivator or product manufacturer, transporting the product is part and parcel of the license that you receive. There is also an assumption that maybe not every cultivator will want to have the infrastructure and the vehicles necessary to do the secure transportation. So they created an additional category for third-party transporters, which is a separate license category that was not originally contemplated under 4094G. So there's the possibility of that setting up as a separate use, which you could address in the zoning as to where that type of facility could be located. A third-party transporter also has the ability to store product, so there are potentially some concerns that could relate to zoning concerns with that type of license category. But that's the transportation side. The delivery side, direct to customer, is the part that has not yet been addressed by the Cannabis Control Commission, and it was felt that they needed additional time to look at that issue, to look at how that might operate from a licensing standpoint, and they've put off consideration of that till at least February of 2019. So there's no existing license category for delivery. And that is something that you may want to look at amending your zoning bylaw at some point in time. But I will note, just given the way Nantucket is situated geographically, there are restrictions on having particular zoning that prohibits the transportation within your community. So it's, you could maybe restrict home delivery, but you're not going to be able to regulate it such that you're impacting the ability of existing operations to engage in the transport of their product.
I think it's a good question, Don, because, people who had a medical marijuana license before, June 1st, 2017, the provisional, they get to keep it. So the state can throw out these things on us.
I just want everyone to contemplate that the retail as of February 2019, if they put in the regulations for home delivery, could immediately start doing
Right.
home delivery with whatever state regulations, with no local regulation of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I just think it's something we should be aware of.
Matt, I know you got something.
No, I have plenty, but I'm just listening.
Do you have any questions for Katie?
Not particularly. I think what she's talking about is even leading to more questions, just delivery issue and everything else. I think we should be, again, I'll just repeat, we should be going slow on this. I don't think we should be, we're trying to dampen down a party culture out here in the summer. And I don't think, going full speed ahead on this is smart. I'm not against it. I watered my roommates in college plants millions of years ago. So it's sort of, but I think that we have to be very careful with this, because once we say yes, we can't take it back. And we could have people driving it all around the island. We could have all different things happening that we can't even contemplate. I'm also troubled when you look at who is doing this. Like when you look at surveys, the federal government and the top echelons of state governments love it because they all get the money. But I worry, but the local governments are concerned because we're going to get the cost of this. We're going to be the ones paying for more policemen. We're going to pay for more people going to the emergency room. We're going to pay for more health and human services issues. We're going to pay if there's zoning problems and we have to try to fix it. I mean, so what's happening? The positives, they're looking at the money. You've got John Boner and is doing it in Weld, are they're going big time. This is basically a repeat of, in my opinion, this is a repeat of tobacco. This is a repeat of cigarettes. And so you've got these guys. They're not, they're in it for the money. They're not doing this it's good for the island. We approved the medical, and I think that we should have approved the medical, but I didn't vote on that medical non-approval so that we could have someone slide in with a recreational that eventually is going to turn around and deliver all over the island. That wasn't what we agreed to. And so I think, I hope that the board has a backbone and is willing to, to stand up for what's smart for the island, when it comes time to make these decisions. I hope we aren't just saying, oh, well, they voted for it, because we have the information and the public doesn't. We should be looking at the cost of this. I've shared, a bunch of studies of how much it's going to cost Connecticut, how much it's cost other states. We have all read that, and if we ignore that, shame on us. So I just think we should move carefully, see how it goes, and then add it another time. But I've made that clear a couple times now.
A quick question for the board and Katie. If we go to special town meeting and whether we want to ban it, limit it to 1 or 2, and it fails, then where do we sit? What happens then? Is it just wild, wild west come January 1st?
Well, not necessarily Wild West, because you do have zoning in place that limits the locations in which it can locate. That doesn't mean that you can't, go back and at a later date try and impose additional zoning or additional limits. Anybody that comes in and gets permitted in the interim could potentially be grandfathered if you then put in place more restrictive zoning, for example, with respect to, say, zoning district, and you have somebody in a different district. So that's a possibility, although we've talked about the possibility before of a host community agreement also being a little bit of a gatekeeping function with the Board of Selectmen, because you have the opportunity to look at each applicant and approve a host community agreement for the particular enterprise, and make sure that you have a community impact fee that will help reimburse the costs. And that's a prerequisite of anybody applying for a state license. So nobody will be able to open an establishment unless they have come before this board and negotiated that type of agreement.
But you can't really deny a host community agreement if there's not a good reason, right? Like if they're not in a school zone and it's not, like, you can't really deny it legally, or can you? Like, we can't use that to limit it, like if it failed at the ballot.
I'm not going to stand here and tell you that you can use that as a method of prohibiting marijuana, but you can make sure that the establishments that are proposing to locate in your community are locating on terms that are acceptable to the board.
So, yeah, I just still come back to the fact that, I mean, we can bring anything forth for town meeting. I mean, we could propose a ban, we could propose a limit, we could propose to expand zoning to other zones, on the flip side. But before we specifically write up articles, I'd like to have a better understanding of what the community wants.
I think I would agree with that. And I think that there's somewhere in between the Wild West and the going slow. And that's the general sentiment I get from the community. Not that it's a free-for-all, but I don't get a general sense that there is a ban. But I think having maybe the public forum, I don't know if you think that's the best way to get at it, but the public forum, that, like similar to what we had before, that was well attended. And I don't know if there's little cards at the back. I don't know in terms of getting individuals' responses, but at least as a start, because I don't really know where people sit other than somewhere middle of the road.
Melissa had her hand up if we're taking public comment.
Yeah.
Hi, Melissa Murphy. I'm 3 Alexandria Drive. Question to the board about whether or not there is a subcommittee that is working on this with you to help, and staff to help advise and lead that, because it strikes me sitting in the audience tonight that having a quickly formed subcommittee made up of someone from the planning office, a member of your board or two, community members who are interested in the retail aspect of the business, maybe the growing, but I think you can put together a group of people who can then help advise and do the research, communicate with council and the Cannabis Control Commission, and that might help deflect some of the time that your committee is spending on it and staff, and also help lead you to a better informed bylaw proposal when it comes to special town meeting.
Are you volunteering?
No.
It's a great idea. I don't think that hasn't happened at this point.
But as Dawn said, I think it's important we have these conversations as a board. So I think it's maybe hard for us, but I'd also be interested in getting input from other, I guess, maybe constituencies besides the public. I don't know if the school board has taken a position on retail marijuana. I'd be very interested in knowing if the hospital's medical staff has taken the position on on this. I don't know if the Board of Health is talking about it. I don't know. We haven't. It's not been something we've been discussing. So there are other groups of folks out there besides end users, I guess, who might be interested in giving us a professional perspective based on their own area of expertise.
Are you suggesting we invite them at a future meeting?
No, I don't know the. I'm just suggesting.
I think it's a good idea.
I think there's groups of people out there that we'd be interested to hear from, and that includes the list that I mentioned. Whether they'd feel comfortable coming here, or if I don't know. I think it would be good to solicit their input.
I think we had talked about, we had thrown out there to have 2 public hearings before the date we need to have everything ready for special town meeting. Would one of those be something that that we're talking about now? One could be public, open.
Well, we could send a letter to the school board asking them, have you all discussed this within the school board? Have you taken a position? We're looking for guidance on the establishment of retail. We could do the same thing to the hospital's medical staff. Send a letter saying we're seeking their input, and maybe they'd be interested in discussing at their meetings and coming back and giving us some feedback.
It's good ideas.
Is that a motion? I'll second that if that's a motion that we do that, I think.
All right, I'd make that motion. So I'd say school committee, Nantucket Cottage Hospital medical staff. I also add the counseling center, their board. I don't know if are they discussing these kinds of things. I'd be interested in what they're saying. So those are the three I'd add.
Isn't there a collaborative?
Alliance Against Substance Abuse.
ASAP.
Yep, ASAP. So is that I made that motion, and is it seconded? Okay.
Second, yeah.
Just for discussion,
Yeah.
so we can be clear on exactly what this is.
I was just going to say, can you be more clear what the counseling center is? Do you mean Fairwinds?
Yes, that's their
Okay.
name.
Yeah, but there's a
yes.
collaborative group with
Yeah.
Gosnold and.
Right.
And we're just looking for a position, a letter.
Yeah. Are you discussing it? What are your thoughts? So,
Something burning to say.
I'm going to help.
Brooke, yes.
Behavioral Health Task Force is
there we go.
That
Behavioral health
organization
task
was
force.
looking for.
Yes.
Looking for.
more to Henderson's Drive.
Yes.
Okay.
I had two of the words right.
Yeah. And if we wanted this discussion, again, in a public
do we
forum, or
need
just
a- Is there someone who's going to be like a point person on this?
I don't know,
Yeah.
to be frank.
I mean, we can send a letter out. We'll see
Yeah.
what we get. I mean, I just, signed by
I
the
mean,
chairman.
Yeah, we can do that. Did you want to add Board of Health to that, or?
Yes.
Yeah, as well.
I mean,
Or maybe the chair and co-chair can talk about this, the agenda meeting, and look at who else should be invited. I mean, we can't, it's hard to do it here, in front of a camera, but.
And come up with a complete list.
Melissa?
Yeah.
But I think the motion is to send a letter to those, and I think if we take a vote on it,
That's what we said.
we can go ahead and implement that motion.
Okay. So is everybody clear on what we're voting on?
I don't want to vote yet till I hear what Melissa's got
Okay.
some advice.
Melissa?
She's got words of wisdom.
Well, I don't know. I just want to offer, though, that the difference, in my opinion, between a public hearing where you're asking for unsolicited or, asking for opinions, there may be lack of clarification in what you're seeking an opinion on. So I just caution you to be really careful. And I think the idea of having a subcommittee or a point person, a point group can help disseminate the facts to those groups in a way that they're offering an opinion that's based on those facts. So what is it you're asking them to consider and be concerned about or to offer an opinion on exactly? And I dread a little bit a general thought. This is we're going to have a public forum on our cannabis laws and zoning laws. Come tell us what you think. And there's going to be such a broad range. I think we saw that in the first public forum that you had. So, really narrowing down what it is you're asking them to give you their opinion on. And to Don's point of there being a point person or a point group, maybe someone from planning, Board of Health, Board of Selectmen, police, there could be maybe 5 or 6 people that you ask to be that point group who are in close contact or at least have close control over the information that's coming in from the Cannabis Control Commission in the state. That's just my 2 cents.
And my motion was more of a parallel. I mean, didn't negate that at all. If that's something you wanted to do, but it's really because to Dawn's point, if we're going to have some articles, we need to be getting after it.
Ready for a vote?
Well, if you say, what's the question? I'm asking, do they see any issue with us legalizing, having recreational marijuana? And how will it impact their constituents and their, what they do? Because the people we're talking about are mostly health and, public safety and other issues. I mean, I think that's, we haven't heard from those people yet, really.
And mine was kind of general. Have you talked about this, and what are your thoughts? So
Yeah.
I just,
I think keeping it general, I think figuring out exactly what we are asking is important because I feel that particularly with the list that we've named off already, if we ask the wrong question, we're setting it up for them to tell us that they want 0 based on the people that we've asked. So we're sort of biasing the answers. So I think having a broad spectrum of the potential stakeholders that include all of the ones that we've listed, maybe some more that we add to it, but making sure that the question is right and that they have the information that they need to have to be able to answer the question. That's
Well, I give them credit for having to be thinking about this, and it wasn't at all meant to be, pointed in one direction or not. I think it was just an open-ended question. Have you been talking about it, and what are your thoughts? So, I think that's to get more specific than that would drive them into a conclusion that I'm not sure we want them to make. So I'll call the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. I think one of the public forums would not, for me, would not just be listening. It would be also to inform. If you have everybody here, you're asking for their opinions, but you're also getting them to understand what happens if we ban it, if it doesn't, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, where is it going to go? I still think there's a lot of, it's not misinformation. People just don't know exactly what's happening with it, right? We know there's a moratorium, but now what? So I think some of those public forums help get the message out.
Yeah.
And hear what the public has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are things like home delivery that people haven't even necessarily contemplated yet.
I think people might be interested in knowing this, how the resolution, which is new since the town meeting about the transportation, the fact that we can do this manufacture, whatever, cultivation within. So that's the solution I think that the state has come up with on the federal transportation stuff, although we don't know how the seeds get here. But I think there's some information we can share, and there's also an opportunity for feedback. And
Home transportation, I could see it going out to the beaches, I could see guys driving all over with it. They'll you'll go on your phone and it'll show up. I mean, even though it's illegal
I mean,
to do on
that's
the beach.
probably happening now.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It is.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, without getting, I think the Cannabis Control Commission has done a good job of being thoughtful in their rules and regulation promulgation. So I give them some, so that's all.
And I mean, I feel like we come off a little bit negative because we're talking about like, should we ban it? I mean, that's if that's what the community wants. There are pros to that. The product is all tested. It's not going to be laced with something that people don't know about. There are, potential good things about this being legal too. So I just don't want to come off as that we're coming from a completely negative space on the industry.
Well, I'll go on record that I'm not in favor of banning retail marijuana at this point. So I don't know if that's just as one person.
And I'm not sure that we even need to falsely limit it because I don't think the island economically is going to support more than a couple of shops, if even more than one,
I agree with
with
that.
the seasonality.
I think you would be shocked if you read some stuff from Telluride and Aspen and looked at the numbers those businesses are doing, $2 to $3 million a year in single storefront businesses. They've had to change their sign rules around. The people have found, they've found ways to put huge hot dogs, huge Matt's hot dogs and that, little sign next to it, Matt's pot. But they've all sorts of weird things they didn't predict have happened to them. It's been very difficult, and it's had a very negative impact. And I agree with Don that there are some good aspects, but let's make sure we understand all the negative ones and move slow enough that we don't end up in the situation that sort of Aspen's in, and out there it ends up being a Snowmass had to adopt it because all the people in the bars weren't going to Snowmass anymore. They'd leave the mountain to go into Aspen because they could drink and smoke. So now Snowmass had to do it. They wanted to remain a family-friendly mountain, and now they're having to adopt it. So I just think, we have to be, people should get on and read other places and other experiences. I just think it's eye-opening.
Yes. Listening.
Does not need water, that's all right. Karen Warner, I'm a resident for a couple of years out here. I just came back from Seattle, Washington, which is Washington and Colorado both are, it's all legal. And you can walk down the street and literally smell people smoking, which is fine. But let me give you just a little picture of the places I've been in both states. Both recreational and medical are the storefronts are very small, they're very clean, and they're just like walking into a jewelry store here. Everything's under glass, everything's protected, and there's usually not more than 2 or 3 people in those little places at a time. Now, when we're talking about delivering it to someone's home, I'm in favor of recreational and medical, but even me, who's seen quite a bit of that going on out in those 2 states, delivery is just something that just kind of blew my mind when I heard it. I'm like, why would you ever think of that? And that would be something that you also on a local level would be able to say, not interested. But it's, for most people out there, it's very positive, in addition to some of the crazy stuff that does go on, because it doesn't matter, with alcohol, with anything else, we have to balance it out. And I remember sitting at the town meeting last fall, and I didn't get up because I was just too freaking nervous. I think we imagine sometimes just the worst possible whatever could happen. And the places that I've been into are remarkably clean and controlled, and it's not crazy. And I'm not even, honestly, I'm not even somebody who uses, but I wanted to know what is going on because it's important. I've seen the benefit of people using medical and recreational, okay, but specifically medical, and think that's huge for us. And to just allow that, I don't know that even in the summer you're going to get 1,000 people trying to cram into one building, wherever it's at, a retail building. It could happen, but I think you can, when you're talking about zoning and that kind of thing, that's going to be huge as well. But I think it's something that, yes, we have to be concerned about, but it does feel kind of like, let's not do this. And I'm on the other side going, let's just give it a little try, somewhere between the wild, wild west and not doing anything at all. So that's just I just came back from Seattle not 2 weeks ago. And it's very chilled. You don't even know these places when you're walking or even driving by them. It's like, are you really? Wow. Because they're very small, very almost incognito-ish. So that's my input.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, and I mean, I am leery of proposing something like a ban because I don't think it's what people really want, and it could take away our ability to propose something else. Like maybe what we really need to do is think about not allowing home delivery right now because we want to see how the rest of it goes and see what the CCC comes out with. And if we propose 5 different articles and they're all doing some kind of a limitation, they may all not get approved. And maybe we really needed to get this one or these 2 approved. And so that's just, I want to be really careful about how we handle this.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
Some public forum, at least to start for getting information out. I like that idea, sooner rather than later.
Do we want a subcommittee?
I don't know.
What's the time frame?
Yeah.
Libby, to have something
It's just so hard to
figured out for
more
special town
meetings.
meeting.
I'm working on the timeline for that, for your meeting for next week, but I think it's likely to be early to midsummer.
So we have May and June for,
Well, if you want to have a public forum, it probably May and June would be
Right.
best.
that's the time.
Yeah.
So the subcommittee would have 2.5 months too. Well, it could continue on, but
Yeah, I think
I don't know
roughly.
that we need a subcommittee.
okay. So it doesn't seem like there's someone wants to make a motion for a subcommittee or a work group at this point. Doesn't mean we can't do it later.
I'm
You know.
worried that there's not a lot of time to convene another group to really get at this in
Yeah.
the time frame to submit something for a fall town meeting.
And I think sometimes we delegate things to a work group when, these are things we need to talk about ourselves.
So it might be a way to engage people who would be on that subcommittee in other
Right.
ways, whether it's an internal meeting
No, I mean,
you
just
know,
to hear
with
it,
staff.
I'm talking about what we're doing tonight. We need to talk about these things.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm saying if in lieu of a subcommittee, there might be other ways that we could do it without being a work group or a subcommittee. So do we need to vote on having public forums now, or is that something that we can just do internally?
If you want to have one, we'll set one up and we'll work with the chair and vice chair, I guess, on a date
Okay.
and how you want it set up specifically.
I think it'd be helpful to have Katie here to talk about the changes. I don't know if she'd be available, but in terms of getting information out.
I wonder if we could do something that's maybe a little bit more like the charrettes type thing.
Yeah.
Or where people could write something down anonymously. that
Would the
kind of thing,
charrettes be
rather
good?
than-
I was thinking the same thing.
Rather
and I
than
don't know if there's
just
enough time.
everybody sitting here and having to speak to us up here. Well,
Would that be something, though, and I don't know if we have enough time, but almost at least an information session to get the information out there so then the charrette people have the information they need to go through that? I don't know, but
is
I do
that
think.
feasible? Do we have time to get something like
Who are
that
the
down?
charrette people going to be? Other than
That's
me.
the other problem, yeah.
And I-
That was why I was
I mean,
looking for a point person,
That's
other
why I
than
was
you.
looking away from you. The charrette needs to be set up,
Yeah.
it needs to be not disorganized, and we need to have materials there and stuff. So that's going to take some, if you want us to do that, I guess we can try to work it. But just remember, there are a lot of things going on right now.
At a minimum, the ability, to do some kind of a presentation for the people who come or have some kind of information out there, but the ability for people to anonymously say something to us, I think, is important.
You all can obviously take your own input from constituents as you go about your daily lives. A couple of things that I was sort of mulling over in my own mind was we could try to do some kind of a Survey Monkey thing ourselves from town admin. We could do some social media about just sort of putting it out there. Does anybody have any questions? Submit them to, this address. Submit it in writing to us, however you want to get it to us. To get it to us within this particular time frame, we can try to put it in some kind of a list of comments, questions that have come in to you all, that kind of thing.
But I think we're talking about information as though we have all the information. And I think we have what the law is, but I don't think we've done any work to suss out what the impacts of this might be on the community, positive and negative. And so if we have a charrette or a meeting or invite people and that part hasn't been done, it's going to be another conversation like the one we're having. So I just think it's, I don't know. I'm a little troubled, like that. If you're not looking and saying and asking, the hospital and the police and other people that deal with us on a daily basis, what the impact is, and we are, but if we don't have that information in easily digestible form, if we aren't looking and saying, here's been the positive and negative impacts in these other communities, if we don't, here's how they're trying to roll it out in this state, here's why they're doing it, here's the guys who are going to benefit, this is, I think it's very interesting how this thing is gaining steam, and so this is big business. This isn't to help the little guy. This is big business. This is a huge industry. And like the question, why would they deliver? Well, because then you could have a big 10 million square foot plant somewhere that's able to deliver everywhere. So I just think I wouldn't be so and to say the Cannabis Commission knows what they're doing, it's a political thing that's being pushed right down, they're being impacted and pushed in certain directions. So I just think we got to be very careful.
Well, time is ticking. We have
Yeah.
a couple months. Again, it's another complex issue that I feel we're trying to, the public needs to understand it. I mean, they don't read this stuff like we do every night. This is we signed up for. So getting it out there so they can give some feedback. I know some.
But what are you giving them? If you're giving them the same thing we've had 3 or 4 times about what the law is, that's step one. Step two is what's the impact of that law? What's that impact going to be here? Those are the things that I think we have to know to have meaningful discussion about it.
I don't think that we have the time, and I think that we don't have that information out either. I think it's important to share the information that we do have so that people can at least start thinking about it. And then as we have the information on the impact, then we can share, that can be additional information. But I think waiting until we have all of it with the time frame we have doesn't seem reasonable. And I have another question for Katie, just some of your comments, Matt, about it being big business. I don't know if there's a way that we can favor local, smaller, and that kind of goes back to the craft cultivators. And is there a way to say, we only support micro businesses or craft cooperatives or something like that?
Yeah. So on the state level, the fact that they've created these categories of microbusiness and craft marijuana cultivator is a way to build into the state law the ability to favor local residents, because you have to, for either of those license category, have been a resident of Massachusetts for at least 12 months prior to filing that license application. It's a little bit more difficult to impose those kinds of limitations yourselves because there's a zoning uniformity principle that basically precludes you from treating equal applicants differently, just based on, for example, their ownership or structure, which is why it's difficult for many communities to regulate what's known as, for example, formula business bylaws have been struck down in some communities because they're intended to favor a particular type of owner over another business. But like I said, the state has built in some mechanism in here to allow those types of businesses to get a particular type of treatment and a particular type of license category that is potentially more favorable for their business structures and allows smaller businesses to enter the market over the big capital, big business. Yeah.
But Katie, the person making the application for the license needs to be a resident for 12 months, correct?
That's correct.
So what does that say about there being a subsidiary of another corporation that may own 20 of these? I mean, is that?
Well, under the Cannabis Control Commission regulations, there are particular restrictions that are imposed with respect to individuals and their ability to hold multiple licenses. And so they don't necessarily just look at a corporate structure, they look at who are the principals and who are the owners of those businesses. And if you have a major role in one of these corporations, you're limited in the general license categories to no more than 3 licenses in any given category. So there are some state-imposed limitations on individuals and the amount that of the market they can control.
One of the big arguments that I've read in the newspaper is that the smaller businesses and the women and minority businesses that thought they were going to have access to this have been locked out because the rich white guys have already, got their leases in place and had the lawyers to draw everything up. And so there's sort of a tension and a battle up there over some of these issues. And I think that's, so you asked me, how do you protect the local growers? My answer is you ban it and they're going to still keep growing and do fine. But if we actually do it, if we say, hey, let's have 2 or 3 of them, and all of a sudden they petition the steamship and the airlines and find a way to get the product over here, then the product's going to be coming from elsewhere and the money's going to be going right off the island. So, until we know what those things are, if we really are concerned about protecting local growers with their 6 or 12 or however many plants they have, then we ban it. And those guys keep selling. But, so I just think I'm just very wary of this, as you guys can tell.
Yeah. Regardless, whatever we propose it's not up to us. It's taking it to the community for a vote.
Maybe Katie could provide us with a sort of this is just a thought I'm having, a bulleted list of the items that the town can control through regulation or bylaw, and what, we could have it online maybe and just see what people think about it. For example, I was just jotting down some stuff. Home delivery can be banned or regulated in some way. What do you think about that? Yes or no? is there a way to support only craft businesses? Here's how you would do it. Do you support it, yes or no? I think through prior discussions, we want to be sure to establish a local licensing process. What sorts of things are we allowed to consider? But something not 50 pages, double-sided, that it's hard for people to get through. It's got to be, this clearly takes some time to put together, and maybe there's some other towns out there that have already done this. I don't know. I think everybody's sort of struggling with it all at the same time. If we had somebody's model that we could copy and put Nantucket on it instead of wherever. But I just don't know if something like that exists. There certainly are a lot of articles in newspapers and news reports about what is happening in Massachusetts. Some of the impacts that Matt is talking about are in these reports, but it takes someone to go through it and read it over and look at it. And either that, I don't know how much that's our thing to do.
In terms of other communities, you all saw it too, the Mass Municipal Association Cape Cod chapter, whatever, is holding a meeting conference over on the Vineyard soon. It might be nice to have someone. I tried to figure out how to get there by 10 a.m. and also, and be in the parking lot by 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard to get there from here.
Yeah, but it might be nice to have someone go if they
What's the
could.
date on that?
I don't remember the date.
18th. I think it's May 18th. I think. But it's May, yeah.
I may have a way to get there by private vote.
Oh,
Okay, so we had a vote on give us some direction. We're going to do a public hearing or two in the next 2 months, and it was a good discussion tonight. Any other thoughts to wrap it up? No, Katie's got to catch a boat.
Yeah, I liked Libby's ideas for trying to get some more of that information as well.
Survey,
so.
something like that. Simple.
Mhm.
Melissa?
I totally agree. I think Libby's idea is great. And I think to the point of what is it that we're asking the community to consider? What are the things that we're asking them? The difference between, I voted to legalize marijuana and a ban, there's so much stuff in between. So I think as best you can to be really clear on what it is you're asking us for our input on. And what I think that idea of if we say yes to this, maybe this will happen. Are you cool with that? That's a really great idea. And something online where people can, give you that feedback really quickly is great. The school committee has done surveys within our school community before. So, perhaps asking the new chair if they can send that to the school community and get parents, use those boards and commissions to be sending that out for you is also another great idea. But being really clear on what it is we're looking for is, I think, really important. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. That's always my point is, people who voted yes or no in November 2016, we need to explain where we're at now and what we're voting on or could be voting on.
Yeah, I think we have legal medical marijuana here. So we voted to legalize it. We have it in that venue. People can grow it at home now. It's legal. It's different than what we sort of thought back then, in my opinion. The other just quick comment, it's interesting, is this is pretty, how it's gone is I would say, it's like my son, he's on Facebook, he gets, because he listens to certain music and answers certain things, he gets certain information. And so he shares with me his information. And it's pretty incredible what is being put out there as fact. He's 24 years old. I think he'd be smarter than this, but geez, Dad, this is healthy. It's a natural product. And I'm like, where are you reading this? He'll go, oh no, everyone knows that. But he's being targeted online because of how his age and the stuff that, and the music he listens to and other stuff. And I'm like, no, Henry, read about it. It's just as bad as cigarettes, and et cetera. And so, you use it in moderation. So there's certain things like that, there's been this groundswell building, but some of it has been built very intelligently and very, purposefully, using modern techniques. And here we are saying we don't even have time to have a meeting. So we're up against a pretty organized, industry that is now, wants to wants to make a lot of money and wants us to pay potentially for the results of it. And I think we should be careful.
I think being careful, Matt, is we don't get the information out. We don't do our due diligence with the public. And let's say we try to ban it and it fails because it could go both different ways.
I understand that, but if we try to ban it and we were united and we say we're banning it to actually gather the stuff that we don't have time to gather now, and I think the community would, or if the hospital and and the teachers and everyone else comes and says, geez, here's the impact. We have a serious drug problem on Nantucket. We have a serious drinking problem. Geez, we're really worried about this. If the community actually comes out and says that, then I think there might be support to go slower. But once you let the reins out, you can't pull them back. And I just think we've got to, just remember that. And I know right now on this board, I'm staking out the furthest position, but maybe not. Maybe there's someone else along with me. It doesn't feel like it, but I've been beating this drum now for a couple months, and I will continue to do that.
I think going slow makes sense, but I want to hear from the public and I want to get the information out. We don't know if majority of people want to ban it. We just don't know that. Anything else?
No. Thank you for the discussion. It was great.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for everybody, all the comments. Thank you, Town Council, for coming out. That's it. Just the third quarter reports.
Thank you. Good evening, Tom Raft, Airport Manager, and I appreciate that issue that you just were dealing with. Good luck. It's critical, obviously, dealing with the unanticipated impacts, and for some reason, I just couldn't get out of my mind thinking a few years down the road what maybe some of the public comments could be as this goes mainstream and what public meetings could be like. It's critical that you get it right, so good luck with that.
Thanks.
I didn't know if the chair wanted me to wait or he was signaling me to go ahead. Okay. So the airport at the end of the third quarter, our revenues are up about $400,000. Our expenses are up a little higher than that, but what you'll notice on this first page is that the reliance on retained earnings is down significantly from last year of $1.1 million to $218,000. Our starting retained earnings was $1.9 million. As you put the current surplus in there, $1.4 million, and then back out the approved use of other retained earnings, you can see we're down to a projected fund balance of $2.3 million at the end of March. And what we're doing there is we're moving money from our retained earnings into some of the projects to alleviate having to go into further debt. So we're trying to control and reduce our debt service. As you go on to the next page, you'll see the details. If you can see that. In any case, as I mentioned, the revenues are up by about $450,000. The expenses are up by about $531,000, giving us our surplus of about 2.5 before debt service. And then after debt service, which is just a little bit lower than last year, we come down to a surplus of about 2.5 million. And then when you consider all other, 1.6 million, you consider all the other ins and outs, the net is about 1.4 million. So we're slightly below last year's progress, but we're still well above water, keeping our heads above water, so we're in the positive. Any questions, Jason? I'm sorry.
So I just have.
I was told to move on.
I'd like to give us an update on the restaurant service and when's that going to begin?
The restaurant, they're working to move back in. They were hoping to be in May 1st, but it doesn't look like they're going to be able to make that. It's looking like hopefully the second week in May. But they are moving their equipment back in. The vestibule work is just about complete, but it can be opened without the vestibule too. So you're going to see a whole different place when you go in there now.
And gift shop, anything going on with the gift shop?
The RFP for the restaurant operation included the gift shop, and they'll be utilizing that space on a seasonal basis for a grab and go quick sandwich, bite, coffee
But it'll be
type of
food and
operation.
not gift shop kinds of.
They may have some retail items they mentioned in their proposal from local merchants and things.
Okay. And but you want to, because we've seen some things, can you just kind of give us a summary of what's going to happen with summer airline service?
Yeah, it's going to be very, very busy. JetBlue is adding at least one flight. They wanted to add 2 more flights, so they're going to be up to at least 8 flights a day on I believe 5 of the 7 days a week. American Airlines is adding service to
Is it
Charlotte.
all to LaGuardia?
No, that's to New York or to Kennedy. They also fly Boston and Washington, D.C., so they have 3 cities.
Okay.
American will be adding to their Washington, D.C. service, Charlotte service on Saturdays. Delta will be focusing on LaGuardia, and United Airlines is switching over to jets and expanding from a 6-week season to a 10-week season. We were hoping, and we're still pushing to develop this. It was going to be a structured awning similar to what is at Jetties and other restaurants around the island. Unfortunately, we've had many, many issues with regard to contractors and bidding process and everything else. So it may end up that it is more or less like a tent for this season. But the carriers are adamant that they have to have something because of the increase in passengers they're going to see.
Do you have any information from them about reservations in terms of, or do they give any early warning? Or?
No.
No. Okay.
No, unfortunately. It's what we try to do is we try to monitor their websites, and you can usually tell by pricing what seats are available. And I will just say this, that for the entire community, now's a good time to be looking for prices, especially if you're going opposite flow. There are very good prices available to and from New York, Boston, places like that, starting next week.
All right. Good.
Like I looked last night, it's like 140 round trip to New York.
Wow.
If
Yeah,
you're
if
going on
you're going the right
Friday,
direction,
if
you
you're going
can.
on a Friday and coming back Sunday or Monday, you're going opposite the traffic. It's
All right.
it's great.
Okay. Thank you,
Tom.
Oh, hello again, everyone. One thing I didn't notice, I didn't inform everyone of earlier, just a quick thing is, there's some flyers that were handed out last week. There was going to be some construction on Dukes Road this week. The purpose for this Dukes Road construction is to actually locate the physical location of the sewer main that was installed a few years ago. We've had some issues trying to find it, where some contractors have dug up to 13 feet deep and can't find the main. So we had a contractor show come over yesterday to try to do work today that ended up needing more equipment. So they're not able to complete it. They'll be back again next week. I just found this out about 5 o'clock tonight. And what's going to happen is, if we deem that this main was installed not where it says it is on the recorded plans, we're going to make them fix it. We're going to make them dig it up and put it where it belongs. So if anyone's had any calls or comments on Dukes Road, we've had some issues that we're trying to resolve. So on top of a lot of other stuff, but Dukes Road has been in mine and Erica's inboxes an awful lot lately. So I'll go over this quickly. The third quarter for the sewer department ended on a very horrible note in January, but it's how my life changed a little bit there in January. First 9 months, 2018 revenues are up about 5% compared to the same period last year, about $262,000. Revenues collected over the first 6 months of 2018 represent about 88% of our budget. Sewer fee incomes were down 1% versus the same period last year. That has to do a lot with just permitting timeframes and stuff like that. It's not a trend that we're seeing as a negative. It's just the period of time. I will say the month of January was extremely quiet in our office, and I think it was they would rather not bother us that month because everything else was going on. So that could be an indicator why. We lost about $31,000 in revenue funds this year compared to last year, and a lot of it had to do with refunds. Well, with stuff that's been approved over the years from the board for waivers or hookup requests from Dukes Road was one of them. We had to do a lot of refunds on Dukes Road for connection fees and everything, so that took up a lot of time and some expenses. Some of our expenditures that are up this year, we've had some increased staffing, but we had an incredible amount of overtime this winter, which has put up our salaries up quite a bit. A lot of hours put into the sewer force main issues. Again, it's nothing alarming. It's just that certain amount of time period, just everything bumped up, but we're still exactly about where we should be. So there's no fear of that at this point. We do have some more staff on. Some of our other line items, you'll see like some in-state travel or training going on. Because of new staff, there's been a lot of training. There's a lot more training coming as Massachusetts is now an OSHA required state. Municipalities now have to comply with. And we just had a representative here from the Department of Labor Standards for this week. I was with them for about 4.5 hours yesterday. So there's going to be more training coming. And it's due training. It's safety training. I mean, it's stuff that we need. So, but other than that, it's really everything is not remarkable. We're right where we should be. I don't know if there's any other questions or not, but you will see some more training and you'll see some of that stuff going forward. But it's going to be for everybody. So.
But I don't know if this is for you, David, or for Brian, but do we have an estimate on the expenditures or the cost so far of the sewer main project repair?
I think the estimate that EPG had given us is still holding true at about just under $5.2 million total.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. The Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, through the first 9 months, our revenue's down, expenditures are up compared to last year. The tried and true measurement I look for is the municipal solid waste. That's within 1% of last year. C&D slightly down so far. But if we look at the last couple months, we're seeing a real big uptick in a lot of construction-related recovery. So we expect to be on track at the end of the season here. Nothing remarkable to report.
Any questions?
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Is that all, Libby? Consent items?
Yes.
Okay, we have consent items, 1, 2, and 3. We would like to go through these one by one. Do we have any questions? Do we want to make a motion? Do you want to do them one by one?
Motion to approve.
Second.
1, 2, and 3.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That motion passes unanimously. We're on to citizen department requests. We have an appointment for Affordable Housing Trust.
Hang on, didn't we pull 3?
Nope.
Oh, we didn't.
That's on the public
Oh,
hearings.
3 on the next. Okay, thanks.
We have an appointment to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I believe we have the applicant is here. If you'd like to say anything, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Hi, I'm Charity Grace Moffson, and I've applied to be appointed to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And since I moved here a couple years ago, I've been sitting back and observing and trying to see where I might be able to get involved and help out in the community. And I think that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is definitely that place. As I'm sure you've seen from the information that I provided you all, my educational background in particular, I think it relates completely with what we've got going on here. More than that, though,
as much as I love Nantucket's history, and that may be what I fell in love with first, what has kept me and my husband here is our love for the community. And that community is made up of people. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we're looking at solutions, and the fact that this community wouldn't be what it is without the people that we have here. So thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Thank you for volunteering your services.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important work, and I appreciate you getting. So I'd make a motion to approve the
Second.
application.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Charity. Okay, we have a DPW request for waiver of town noise bylaw for line painting at night in high traffic areas around the island. I believe we did this last year. Does the board have any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 3, where it was tabled. We have a public hearing. We're open to public hearing to consider taking the portions of Norwood Street. Is anyone here to speak on that from the public?
Or from planning services.
Do you want Eleanor to explain?
Yeah.
If anybody,
Eleanor.
would you like to just give a brief description?
So I don't think you guys have done any takings for a couple of months. So just to reacquaint you, this was approved at town meeting, I believe, in 2012. The plan was actually approved, as I explained to Jason earlier, in 2013, but went missing. So we had to reissue the plan, get it re-signed, re-record it, and now we're able to do the taking. So this has actually been a matter that should have been dealt with a couple years ago, just got lost in the shuffle. So once we do the taking, we will send it out to all the direct abutters. They'll have a chance to contact me or Director Vorse if they want to acquire the parcel that directly abuts their land pursuant to a price that's set by the assessors, and then it gets reviewed, as we know, by the Real Estate Assessment Committee. And this one will have to go up through the land court. So it'll be a while before there's an actual conveyance, but this is the first or second step, rather.
Any questions for Eleanor?
We have to close the public hearing.
Is there anybody here like to speak on this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, the second consent item. Oh, I'm sorry, consent item,
Public
excuse me. We're continuing the public hearing to consider an application for alteration of premises of annual wine and malt beverage restaurant license for 45 Surfside Road. Just wanted to go over the procedures here really quick. We do this every once in a while. I just open a public hearing. I'd like to have Amy Baxter licensing to give us a brief kind of where we're at. Then the applicant will speak. We'll have questions for the applicant if we have any during the public hearing, then we'll close it for deliberation. Amy?
Before you go, I wasn't here when you had this initially.
Okay.
And their customer, so I'm going to recuse.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So we mentioned this is a continuation of a public hearing from 2 weeks ago, whereas 45 Surfside Road is applying for an alteration of premises for their liquor license, their wine and malt liquor license, which, as we discussed when originally approved, was for the interior of the cafe only. Not for the patio. This request is to extend to the patio. On April 11th, the request was for us to go back and research about your ability to limit patio service to a specific time in the summer months, July and August when school is not in session, and also about activities involving students and children on the grounds of the elementary school across the street during the summer months. Couple things here that I outlined, which is Mass General Law 138, which is the liquor code, Section 12, which discusses your ability to do so, which you do generally have an ability to, if you hold a public hearing, to limit hours and service. Generally, they're allowed to serve till 11 p.m. unless the board has a public hearing to discuss public need for limiting those hours. So you generally do have that ability to do so. Generally, it's used for whether or not you serve on secular or non-secular days or hours, but you do have that ability. However, what I would say, and what I said here too, is the ability to police that or to, am I going to go in there in June and September and see if there's alcohol all the time? It would be difficult to really, like I said, enforce that on a regular basis. We wouldn't recommend doing anything too specific, have too many kind of specifications on a license. That would be difficult. We can put it on there, but to say that I'd be there every day in June and September to see if it's being applied to would be difficult. Secondly, as far as the school's concerned, they may not have activities in the classrooms. However, those fields will be used all summer. The community school has camps there, so activities will be going on. I know there was discussion as far as sight lines and that sort of thing. That's not really what the law is. It is property line to property line. And as we do with church and spiritual activities and schools, you have to rule that it's not detrimental to those activities because of the distance of those property lines. I think that's kind of the two questions any questions from there?
I just also add, you reiterated your earlier recommendations. Is that correct? You want to go over that, please?
Correct. So, it is not recommended, certainly when we initially had this application from the police department and from our perspective, within a school zone, that was not something that we recommended at the time, and still continue to say that it's, not just in this one instance. We have to look at the big picture in this. And once we do this, it's a slippery slope. It opens up options for other areas and that sort of thing. So no, in a school zone, that's not something I think we would support. I'd also say too that it's going to be, a larger responsibility for this one applicant. We would like to reiterate how important it is that they are following the regulations as they are right now. We have some things to work out with them on their COI and some other things that need to be attended to before anything like this, can be issued. So those things need to be taken care of. This is a new responsibility. Alcohol can't leave the premises. It's across from a school, those types of things. So those are things that we consider as well. But the recommendation, again, it's in a school zone.
Can you elaborate on that?
On the issues? Yes. So as we kind of went back and kind of looked at what the situation was, I've expressed to them deadlines, renewals. We've had some issues with following those deadlines. They currently are without a valid COI because of some violations a couple months ago. We've had them reschedule that, and if those violations aren't tended to in a proper amount of time, we would petition to suspend that license. So I just want to reiterate how important it is for them to follow these regulations. They're not just
how long have they been in violation?
Since end of January, I believe.
So February, March, April, 3
And then in
months?
March they had, is that correct, Chief? March, they had
Why
a
hasn't that
reinspection.
license been suspended?
Well, I found out about it later. And during this process, I found out some things. We have asked them to reschedule. They did that, I believe, yesterday after I brought this up. And those things need to be tended to. And if they are not in May, then we have something to deal with. But it kind of goes along the line of this is a new responsibility, and I think this is something that needs to be tended to.
So we're just talking about their existing license.
Correct.
And they've been in violation of that since the end of their COI.
That appears to be so, and I would say that if this is approved, that all needs to be taken care of, and we need to work through that process as we move forward.
But you can't deny
No,
something like this because the COI isn't
no,
taken care of,
I
right?
just on record saying that these things need to be. They are important to pay attention to.
Yeah.
There's a blocked exit, some smoke detector issues. Those things need to be attended to.
But I was just
immediately.
speaking of the current license. So it is the violation of it is grounds for
Correct.
revoking of the current license.
Correct.
So it is what my point is.
And so we've
Right?
been.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And so we've, tried to walk them through this. This was their first year. But it needs to, in May, in that second round, taken care of before anything is issued. So if approved tonight, it has to go through the ABCC still, and then we have to go through this. And I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you. Any other questions for Amy? Okay, would the applicant like to speak?
So as far as the
you state your
building.
name?
Oh, Rebecca
Thank
Merzinger,
you.
owner, 45 Surfside. As far as the building is concerned in terms of the having the inspection, we did have our inspection, and we had a number of things that needed to be taken care of. Most of them were pretty easy. Putting a lock on our locks for the all the switches, the light switches, and all of that, and all of the alarms and things like that. We had to get Wayne alarm out. It wasn't easy because these people aren't used to coming this time of year. They're like, "Why are you saying this now? We all come in June." So we're like, "Well, we need it now." The biggest problem was the cement. Everything got done, but we needed to get cement where the handicap was, and all of the directions said you got to wait until the weather's like a certain temperature and all of that. So once that got done, the temperature was where it needed to be, then that happened. But it's been a while that everything's all set, and we did get the inspection, and not the inspection, but the appointment. But that did take some time. You all know the weather's been horrible. Just absolutely terrible. I've had weeks where we've had no deliveries, of food and all that. So it's been a challenge, but that was one of them. And it's a big building. There's 3 floors, so there's a basement, first floor, and apartment. And so it's a lot. That's a lot to take care of. But it just took a list and we went off of it. But the cement part, that was something we had no control over. It's outside, the weather's bad. We have to wait until the weather will allow us to put the cement there.
Okay, thank you on that. Is there anything you'd like to comment on the license that you're applying for?
Well, of course, I would love it if we could have the outdoor beer and wine. I think it's something we can definitely handle. Absolutely no one drank a beer or wine on our deck all year. If any of you have been there, I'm right there. I can see everything that goes on. I pay very close attention. I'm there 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Not much gets beyond me. So I see a lot. I'm watching everyone. So I don't have a problem with that. It's not going to be a problem. And they're all tip certified, everybody out front, so
Thank you.
it's not an issue.
Any questions for the applicant from the board?
No.
Okay,
All right, thanks.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Portia Merzinger, and I'm Rebecca's daughter. Thank you for allowing us to speak again. So Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Chapter 138, Section 16C states, located within a radius of 500 feet of a school or church shall not be licensed for the sale of alcoholic beverages unless a local licensing authority determines in writing and after the hearing of the premises are not detrimental to the educational and spiritual activities of said school or church. Being 334 feet from the school means that we are here today to determine if the sale of beer and wine on 45 Surfside patio would impair the educational efficiency of the Nantucket schools. I recently went inside the school and took photos from all the windows facing 45 Surfside, facing 45 Surfside, in which our establishment is never visible. I don't believe something that you cannot hear nor see from the classroom can impair your education. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public like to speak on this?
Hi, guys. I'm Rebecca Nimmerfro, and I'm friends with Portia and Rebecca Mosinger. And I just wanted to say that, it's my first time in the select meeting, and I should come here more often, actually. But what I've heard is that there's fear that this will be bad exposure to the kids at the schools. And I feel like Nantucket is special in a way that we encourage people to think for themselves. I see the brewery on any Saturday or Sunday in the summer, and it's full with children, parents and children having fun, eating tacos, playing sandbags, stuff like that. And I think it's really great to show children a positive example of enjoying a cocktail in the summer or a nice day outside. I'm nervous. But I think that that's the point here is as Nantucketers, we're a little bit more advance than the real world out there. We allow children to and encourage them to think for themselves. And I think that because it's close to a school that was not there when they bought the building and when they made this beautiful cafe, and now the school is somewhat close by, but it still seems to be a bit of a difference. I was just there like the day before yesterday. I don't think that that's a threat to children to see people on the patio and to think that that this would encourage that type of behavior. Yeah. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else here like to speak? Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Do I have to reopen that?
My name is Emily Peel, and I wanted to say something on behalf of Rebecca and Portia. I live off of Bartlett Road on Miss and Mastons. I'm in 45 Surfside almost every day. I love it. It's a great, fabulous place. I don't know. I just want to say that I really support them, and I feel they've done a great job and brought a lot to that area. Like I said, I'm in there a lot when I'm standing in the windows or out on the deck. You'd never know that there was a school there or, anything. I just don't see a problem at all. So I just wanted to give my support to them. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Any comments, deliberation from the board?
I think that some of the debate we're having would have been is sort of more a bearing on a liquor license in general than expansion of allowing people to take it out onto the deck. When I originally approved this, I'd kind of envisioned that it would be more at night because I thought they were going to serve dinner. But frankly, I've never seen someone even having a drink when I've been in there, and I've been in there a lot for lunch. So I don't think that this is really going to be anything that's going to have much of an impact. But it might mean a bit more business for them during some of the summer months. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree, especially and I know most of us are small business owners. I think they seem to have been fairly responsible. They have support. The scale of the drinking, it doesn't seem like it's huge, like you were saying. But my concern in the past couple weeks is more the adding complexities that are unenforceable. And as well, I feel that we're leaning towards something, or in an approval, I feel like we're muddying the rules for other businesses and being more inconsistent in our approach to how we look at these liquor licenses. And that's my concern more so at this stage than the scale of the impact around the educational activities. It's our ability to enforce and then what that means for other businesses and how they might want to adjust their liquor licenses. So I do hear what Amy's saying, and I do feel like it's opening up a big box of potential, I only want to serve till this hour. Can I only serve till this hour? And it is hard as a business owner, as someone, you want them to see them succeed. So I'm concerned about making those sort of adjustments to the liquor license.
Do you mean in terms of, sorry.
Go ahead.
Of limiting it to July and August kind of thing?
Any of the limitations that we were looking at last time, I think we were looking to see how we could work with them, but I do feel that those are, again, difficult to enforce and unfair ultimately to other businesses unless they have the opportunity to make similar changes. Yeah.
So I just go back to my own thinking when we originally, and I mentioned last time, granted the original license, the existing license, and it was very much of a pilot. It was, I thought long and hard about because it is so close to the school. And my recollection, which we talked about, that there was really more of a bakery operation. I hear the great support the business has in the community, but I haven't I certainly can't support broadening the license to the patio. So I'd make a motion that we deny the application for expansion of the patio, which is the same motion I made last time.
Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second for discussion. Jason, what do you?
I want to be careful if we deny this, that it's on reasonable grounds. And, recommendations from public safety, from police and fire, that recommendation is to not grant this. But this isn't a full license. This is just an expansion of an area. So are the same rules apply as a?
There are certain patio guidelines I think we reviewed last time about, it being roped off or something of that sense, not particularly right on the street, different things of that sort, making sure that there's someone either in direct sight line from inside or a manager of that location, different things of that to make sure that that service is monitored and that alcohol does not leave the premises, because it's obviously a lot easier on a patio. So there are strict guidelines from the state on how we expand it. You're supposed to look at that with a more critical eye than with interior service. Absolutely. They've updated those regulations a couple of times for that. And again, the section that she read is what you have to approve and sign off on about the distance of the school. It's not about sight lines. It's about distance and property lines. We do this all the time with the churches downtown. You can't see the church or you can't see the school, but it's within that distance. So that's a very important fact to consider. And again, like I said, we consider things on a big picture level. It's not initially picking on this one licensee to say that it would be a nightclub or be detrimental, but it is a big picture approach and you have to make that decision.
And when we, I guess for me, the less it is, I know my vote was, I was very impressed with the applicant and their business model. And I thought, I was comfortable making the assumption and making the exception. Even though it was public safety recommended we not make the exception, and I know I probably wouldn't have if it had come forward with the whole package of with it being on a patio or a deck. So I guess in my own mind, I will remember that the next time we're asked to make an exception of any kind.
So your motion is to deny the expansion
based on the language that we would use in this scenario.
Any other discussion? Do we just want to make sure we have reasonable grounds if this passes? Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 So what's
I'm abstaining.
abstaining?
Okay. So the motion passes that the applicant is denied beer and malt license on the patio. 3-0. Yes, thank you, Erica. Okay, so selectmen's reports and comments. We've already done the marijuana discussions. We have the 2018-19 board committee work groups, representative appointments. We have to figure out where we're all going to go this year. Do we have that up here?
Oh, I would like to stay on the Island Home Committee.
Oh, yeah. Did you have an extra?
I never look.
Yeah.
I was away.
That's yeah.
Oh, that'd be
We
good
can change that.
if you did.
Oh, there's 2 reps though.
Yeah,
So, okay,
no. So I just wanted to add myself to that because no one else checked it either.
And the BOEM that has nobody, Libby, you were saying, we were talking about it a bit the other day. Is that more or less the same as the one I'm already on, or is that additional?
It's slightly different, but it's more of a, it meets very infrequently. And it has to do with the offshore wind farms. And if,
Oh, okay. Who was the representative last year?
I think it was Jason and Rita. Was, not you two.
So how many people do we have?
Oh.
So we have 2?
So we never.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if you need to. I think.
So I'll do it. If you want to do it too. Or,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't mind. I am happy to be on it unless there's someone else that wants to be on it.
that's great.
So you too?
Yeah.
And I'd like to step aside for the housing because I think Rita's voice is important there. And as long as she calls me when she needs someone to go and be a pain, I can do that.
Perfect. I know who to call.
Okay, got that figured out.
And then
And
MPDC.
I'll drop it at NPDC if Matt wants to do it.
Great.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there'll be lots of more work groups next year. We'll jump on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any committee reports?
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.